In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on February 22nd, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Fairfield versus Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac comes into this matchup with the kind of quiet confidence you see from a group that has been winning more often than not. 18-10 overall and 11-6 in league play puts the Bobcats right near the top of the conference, close enough to feel the pressure but also close enough to smell a better seed. Fairfield, sitting at 17-11 and 9-8 in the same league, is in that dangerous middle ground where one bad week can drag you down the bracket, and that tension usually shows up in how a team handles a tough road game. The setting matters a lot here. M&T Bank Arena is not some neutral gym. It is a place where Quinnipiac has built real habits, real comfort, and a rhythm that feels very different from what Fairfield gets at home. Earlier this month, the Bobcats already walked into Fairfield's building and walked out with a 72-65 win, and that kind of recent head-to-head result tends to sit in the back of both teams' minds. For the home side, it reinforces the idea that this matchup fits them. For the visitors, it adds a bit of mental weight, especially when they step into a louder, less forgiving environment. Form does not tell the whole story, but it sets the stage. Quinnipiac has taken 4 wins in its last 5 outings, with the only stumble coming in a grind against league-leading Merrimack, which is hardly a shame game. That kind of stretch suggests a team that is not just surviving but actually sharpening its identity. Fairfield has rebuilt itself into a tougher, more athletic unit that wants to play fast and free, and you can see that in how their games often sit in that mid-70s range on the scoreboard on both sides. The catch is that running your preferred style on the road against a team that is comfortable going just as fast, and sometimes faster, can turn into a long night if you are even a little sloppy. There is also the bigger picture. Quinnipiac already owns a statement win over a high major opponent in Pittsburgh from earlier in the season, and wins like that change what a locker room expects from itself. This program is not treating big conference games as nice opportunities anymore. It is treating them as must-handle business spots. Fairfield may be dangerous, they usually are when they can lean into their athleticism, but here they are asked to match a confident home group that has already proven it can beat them and has been trending upward recently. Both sides come in without major injury concerns, so this is not about who is limping to the finish, it is about which 5 on the floor can impose their style for longer. When you stack the home comfort, the recent head-to-head win, the better recent form, and the expectation that Quinnipiac will keep pushing the tempo in front of its own fans, the balance tilts toward the Bobcats being more likely to stretch a modest number into a solid margin by the final buzzer. As our first pick for this matchup, the Quinnipiac Bobcats to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The scoring side of this matchup has a different kind of tension to it. On one hand, the posted number sits in that range that makes people nervous, high enough that you start wondering if the game can really stay that fast and that clean for 40 minutes. On the other hand, when you look at how these two teams actually live, it starts to feel more like the bookmakers are simply acknowledging what the scoreboard usually does when they play their preferred styles. Fairfield's season has been built around playing quicker and leaning into offensive freedom. Their games tend to land around the high 140s when you combine what they score and what they allow, which is exactly what you would expect from a team that wants to run, attack early, and live with a few defensive leaks. Quinnipiac is right in that same neighborhood, usually putting up points in the mid-70s and giving up a number just a touch below that. There was even a campus piece this season pointing out that the Bobcats are running at roughly a low 70s possessions per 40 minutes pace, which puts them near the top of the conference and well up the national list. That kind of tempo is basically an open invitation for a total to stay inflated. The funny part is that the first meeting between these two ended at only 137 points, a 72-65 Quinnipiac win, which looks more modest than everything else suggests. Recent games have also shown the Bobcats grinding through a couple of low-scoring battles in the 50s, so it is easy to think the script might repeat. But the underlying tempo did not suddenly vanish in those outings, and sometimes the ball just does not fall for a night. Fairfield, meanwhile, has played in several high-scoring contests lately, including one that turned into a full-on shootout and another where they comfortably pushed toward 80 against a local rival. Those are the kinds of games that reveal what a team wants to be when the pace loosens up. Context matters too. This is a late-season conference matchup with real seeding implications, and those often turn wild in the final few minutes. If the score is even remotely close, you get extended possessions, quick shots, and the usual cascade of fouls and free throws. All of that is fuel for a total that starts near that high range and keeps climbing as both teams refuse to let the clock bleed out quietly. Honestly, when you put a fast Quinnipiac group and an up-tempo Fairfield squad in the same gym, both relatively healthy and both comfortable playing into the 70s or higher, the game script points more toward a scoreboard that keeps humming rather than one that stalls. The first meeting gave us a slower finish, but the season-long identities of these teams lean the other way, toward a higher scoring outcome. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Northern Kentucky versus Youngstown State. Most people will glance at this matchup, see Youngstown State at home, and think the Penguins should be the safer side. The funny thing is, the season has not really backed that up. In the Horizon preseason poll, Youngstown State was slotted ahead of Northern Kentucky, Penguins sitting in that upper tier while the Norse were penciled in a little further down the board. Fast forward to now, and it is Northern Kentucky with a record of 17-11, solidly in the mix, while Youngstown State sits at 14-14 and fighting to keep pace. That gap between what people expected and what is actually happening is exactly where value often hides. This Northern Kentucky group does not feel like a smoke and mirrors team that just sneaks by. They roll out 4 different players who can carry the scoring load on any given night, which makes them hard to key on. The offense has been one of the better ones in the country, living in that top tier nationally in points per game, and it passes the eye test too. You watch them for a few possessions and you see purposeful spacing, patient ball movement, and then a sudden burst to the rim or a quick catch and shoot three that punishes any lazy closeout. They are not in a rush, but they are never really idle either, and that balance puts a lot of pressure on a defense. The first meeting between these two told that story pretty clearly. Northern Kentucky handled Youngstown State the last time out, winning by double digits in a game that never really felt like it was slipping away from them. That kind of result sticks in the back of a locker room, even if everyone says they have moved on. For the Norse, it builds a quiet confidence because they already know their style can punch through this specific matchup. For the Penguins, there is always that tiny voice that remembers how those earlier runs got away from them. Youngstown State is still dangerous, and the record does not mean they suddenly forgot how to play. They can score, they have been reliable in their own gym, and they usually handle the rhythm of home games pretty well. But Northern Kentucky has not played like a timid road team. They have already stepped into other tough gyms, traded blows late into games, and come out with wins in tight contests. That matters here, because late possessions on the road can feel heavy, and this group has already lived through that weight and come out composed. Both teams bring healthy rosters into this one, so there is no hidden injury angle doing the heavy lifting. Rotations look stable, key players are available, and each coach can lean on the full version of what they want to run. So the question is less about who is short-handed and more about who is built to handle a close game where every possession gets magnified. Northern Kentucky feels a little more balanced, a little more comfortable living in that chaos, and they have already shown that their blueprint works against this specific opponent. In a league where runs can flip momentum in a heartbeat, rolling with the group that has both form and matchup history on its side makes a lot of sense. As our first pick for this matchup, the Northern Kentucky Norse to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Northern Kentucky has been living in high-scoring territory all season, averaging well into the 80s, with an attack that loves volume. They put up a lot of shots, they fire from deep without hesitation, and they do not seem interested in playing slow unless they absolutely have to. When a team is comfortable letting it fly from three that often, the scoreboard tends to move, even on nights when the shots are not falling at a perfect clip. Youngstown State brings plenty of firepower to that picture too. Their offense has been strong, sitting in that upper chunk nationally in terms of efficiency, and they have experience scoring from the forward spot with Chris Carroll. He gives them a reliable presence, someone who can both attack the paint and stretch the floor, and that kind of piece keeps an offense humming even when guards go cold for a few trips. So now you have one team that loves pace and shots, and another that absolutely has the tools to keep up instead of trying to turn this into a grind. Put the season scoring numbers side by side and you get an interesting story. Northern Kentucky lands in the low 80s on average, Youngstown State sits around 80, and simple math suggests that their regular output pushes a typical game into the low 100s and 60s combined. That is without any weird double overtime, just their normal rhythm. When both teams are healthy and their rotation players are getting regular minutes, those averages are not just noise, they are a pretty honest reflection of who they are offensively. The first time they met, the result matched that profile perfectly. They combined for a huge number on the scoreboard, with both sides finding stretches where the defenses looked a step slow and the offenses were a step ahead. Once that kind of game cracks open, it rarely snaps back into a slow, half-court crawl. Both teams start to feel that rhythm, players get comfortable pulling the trigger earlier in the clock, and even missed shots become fuel for quick runouts and transition chances. Northern Kentucky naturally pushes games in that direction with spacing and three-point volume. Their shooters stretch the floor, which pulls bigs away from the basket and opens room for cuts and drives, and all of that usually means more possessions with real scoring chances. Youngstown State does not profile as a shutdown defense, they give up a fair share of points, and that often nudges them to lean even more on their own scoring. That is the kind of dynamic where both teams, almost without saying it, agree to trade punches rather than slow dance. Late season stakes add a little extra gasoline to that fire. Conference seeding is looming, rotation trust is already built, and coaches are far more willing to ride their main guys for heavy minutes. Close games in this spot often turn into long final minutes, with fouls to stop the clock, extra free throws, and set plays drawn up out of every timeout. Those little details pile up on the scoreboard. So when you add up the season scoring profiles, the history of their first meeting, and the way both styles naturally push toward constant action, this matchup looks a lot more like a track meet than a defensive standoff. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Florida Atlantic versus North Texas. This matchup in Denton feels like one of those conference games where everyone assumes the home team will just lean on the crowd, the rims, and the building, but the picture underneath is a lot tighter than that. Books are treating North Texas like the safer choice, a slight home favorite with that familiar respect that defensive teams usually get. Yet Florida Atlantic is not arriving as some nervous road group just happy to be in the building. Under John Jackus in his second year, the Owls have turned into a group that can really score, living in that low 80s range most nights, and still crashing the glass hard enough to stack close to 40 rebounds a game. That kind of profile, a team that can both fill it up and finish possessions, usually travels better than people think, especially in conference play where everyone knows everyone and sets get scouted to death. North Texas with Danielle Robinson has leaned into the grind, putting up around the low 70s while holding opponents in the mid-60s, which quietly creates a long line of games that finish within a single possession or two instead of stress-free blowouts. Those margins whisper that this is more coin flip than comfort zone, and they make laying points with anyone in this matchup feel a little shaky. Layer on the personnel piece and the edges tilt in a specific direction because the Mean Green are already without veteran guard Will McClendon for the season, while Florida Atlantic is dealing more with depth concerns, like losing Zion Sampaio and juggling the status of rotation pieces Devin Vanterpool and Maxim Logue rather than a core identity being ripped out. That kind of injury landscape usually hurts the favorite more than the underdog, since the team expected to control the game has less wiggle room when a key scorer, creator, or defender is missing from the regular script. Florida Atlantic also just proved on this same trip that it can win an ugly road game, grinding out that rock fight at UTSA where both sides struggled to find any rhythm and every clean look felt like a small miracle. A team that can win pretty and win ugly on the same trip, and that already understands how to manage late-game pressure in a strange gym, is exactly the kind of group you want when you are handed a tight spread and told to pick a side. In a matchup that shapes up as possession-heavy, whistle-sensitive, and full of small swings, taking the points with the team that has the deeper scoring options and the proven ability to survive this road stretch simply makes more sense when the final horn sounds. As our first pick for this matchup, the Florida Atlantic Owls to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Florida Atlantic's style on the season makes it very easy for people to picture a game that turns into a track meet because the Owls have lived in that 80-point neighborhood while giving up somewhere in the mid-70s, which pushes their usual combined scores into the mid-150s. They are comfortable shooting from deep, with more than 200 made threes at a clip in the low 30s, and that kind of volume tends to lure fans and bettors into thinking every game is built to soar. On the other side, North Texas brings the ice pack, playing a brand of basketball that prefers deliberate half-court trips, methodical sets, and scores that land in the low 70s for them and the mid-60s for whoever is unlucky enough to deal with their defense that night. Across the season, that has meant their games usually settle into totals in the high 130s, which is a very different rhythm from what Florida Atlantic averages, and that clash of identities matters more than any single box score. When a fast-leaning offense runs into a patient, defense-first group, especially in a conference setting, the slower team's tempo wins more often than not, simply because it is easier to drag someone down into a grind than to push them into a sprint. The injury picture also nudges this matchup toward fewer points, since North Texas is missing McClendon for the year, and Florida Atlantic is dealing with uncertainty around Vanterpool and Logue, which pulls shot creation and spacing off the floor, or at least forces the coaching staffs to shorten rotations and be a little more cautious with how they manage minutes. Thinner backcourts and front courts often show up as longer possessions, more late clock situations, and a few extra empty trips where players are almost feeling the absence of a familiar option rather than as some sudden defensive masterpiece. Florida Atlantic's recent road win at UTSA in a low-scoring grinder is a good reminder that even a team with high season averages can get pulled into a game where every made jumper feels like gold, and that kind of blueprint is sitting right here again with a North Texas squad that already prefers that style. Instead of a wild shootout, this has the feel of one of those games that spends long stretches in the 60s, maybe creeping into the low 70s by the end, where the total score sits in that low 130s neighborhood and never truly threatens a big number. In a contest where both tempo and available shot makers lean toward control, patience, and defense having the louder voice, expecting a more muted scoreboard rather than a fireworks show is the cleaner way to attack this matchup. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Iowa versus Wisconsin. Iowa heads into Madison for a classic Big Ten scrap, and it has that big stage feel where one game can tilt how both fan bases talk about this season. Iowa sits at 19-7 overall and 9-6 in league play, with a first-year coach who has quietly turned them into a tougher, more stubborn group on the defensive end. Wisconsin stands at 18-8 and 10-5 in the conference, still guided by the same steady hand on the sideline and riding the emotional swing of big ranked wins, followed by that rough loss to Ohio State that knocked them down a peg in the bracket chatter. The setting matters here because the Kohl Center does not just host games, it sort of inhales visiting teams for long stretches, and Iowa has looked very different once it leaves Iowa City, more hesitant, more prone to those scoring lulls that get you stuck on a number for 3 or 4 minutes while the road crowd roars. Iowa's identity this year leans on control and composure, the kind of defense that shrinks possessions and makes every catch feel a little contested. They hold opponents in the mid-60s on average, force more turnovers than they commit, and do not waste many trips with sloppy mistakes, which is why their scoring margin looks so clean on paper. That style travels in theory, but in practice their road numbers tell a different story, because when they are not feeding off their own crowd, the offense can tighten up just enough that a good home team can lean on them and force them to play from behind. You can almost picture it, a couple of early empty trips, a few hurried jumpers, and suddenly that patience starts to feel like passivity. Wisconsin, on the other hand, has leaned into what it is this season, a high-powered offense that scores in the 80s, shares the ball, and trusts skilled guards to make decisions late in the clock. They are not the old grinded-out half-court Badgers as much as a group that says, fine, you want to run, we can run, and we will just hit more shots than you. The recent loss at Ohio State, where they got punched in the mouth, actually feeds the spot here because it sharpened the urgency, and it came with a gut punch in the form of the Jack Janicki injury, which forces the rotation to tighten and pushes even more minutes onto their key playmakers. That sounds like a negative, and in a long season it is, but in a one-game betting window, extra minutes for your best scorers in a loud home gym can tilt things toward a cleaner finish, even if it raises the stress level every time someone picks up a third foul. The matchup feel leans into that picture. Iowa's defense is built on keeping the ball in front and contesting shots without fouling much, but Wisconsin's best players are comfortable hitting tough jumpers, and when a defense is forced to defend for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then still watch a guard calmly pull up and score, the body language tends to sag. Home crowds sense that sort of sag, and the Kohl Center crowd is not shy about piling on, especially when a ranked team is defending its floor after getting called out in bracket projections all week. This sets up a script where Iowa can hang around, keep it within reach, and still find themselves chasing late, fouling, and trying to force turnovers while Wisconsin calmly works through sets and turns those possessions into a comfortable margin that looks much cleaner on the ticket than it felt in real time. As our first pick for this matchup, the Wisconsin Badgers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Iowa's numbers show a team that scores in the mid-70s, shoots the ball very well from the field and from deep, and rarely kicks the ball away, which means a lot of their trips end in actual shots, not wasted chances. Wisconsin brings an offense that lives in the low 80s, backed by multiple players who average real volume and efficiency. And that combination of star scoring and solid supporting pieces tends to pull games upward, especially when both sides are confident at the foul line. The math is pretty simple here. Even if you ignore the betting number entirely, both teams are used to playing games where the scoreboard turns over often, and they do it without playing totally reckless basketball. The stylistic mix feeds that story even more. Iowa likes to squeeze you on defense but does not play glacial offense, and when they face an opponent that can force them into more possessions, their own talent usually responds rather than folding into a rock fight. Wisconsin's offensive profile, with strong three-point shooting, a good free throw percentage, and solid assist numbers, creates a constant threat that one 2-minute stretch can produce 8 or 10 points almost out of nowhere, the kind of mini-run that flips a game script and forces the other bench to chase instead of control. Games like that often turn into rhythm contests, where both sides end up trading makes just because nobody wants to be the one that blinks first. History between programs that shift their identities over the years can be noisy, but the recent versions of these teams have already shown a willingness to get involved in shootouts against each other and against similar Big Ten opponents. There have been nights where this matchup has flown past what anyone expected, with totals landing in the mid-150s or even higher, and while that kind of extreme is not automatic, it proves that the combination of these jerseys, this building, and this conference style can absolutely produce fireworks when whistles and shot-making line up. Add in the likely late-game situation, where a close margin invites intentional fouls, free throws, quick responses, and maybe even a little chaos in the final 30 seconds, and you get the sort of ending that can tack on a surprising pile of extra points when everyone at home already feels like the game is decided. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.